They had watched Earth for centuries. Not openly. Not carelessly. Always from a distance, silent, calculating, hidden in the folds of space that wrapped like cold sheets around the galaxy's bones. The ones watching were old. Not ancient in the way time is marked by stars, but old in the way predators grow wise, cautious, patient, brutal. They had seen entire civilizations bloom and burn. Some they harvested. Others they avoided, waiting for weakness. But Earth had been different. Too quiet. Too still. They didn't trust it. From afar it seemed almost laughable. Primitive radio noise, crude ships that barely scratched the edge of the solar system, and short-lived beings driven more by emotion than logic. But it was the silence that unsettled them. The quiet that followed Earth's sudden decision to stop transmitting. No more messages. No more signals. No more drift from satellites. Just silence. And silence, in a universe that howled with endless noise, was unnatural. So they waited longer, circling like shadows, drifting closer with each decade. Watching. Listening. Waiting for Earth to blink. It didn't. Then one of them broke the circle. Against warnings. Against instinct. It moved into orbit cloaked in technology older than Earth's species. Unseen. Undetectable. Test. The scout never returned. That was the first fire. It didn't look like war at first. There was no broadcast, no declaration. One moment the probe hovered like a ghost above the blue planet. The next it was gone. Not destroyed, erased. As if space had swallowed it whole and wiped its mouth clean. The others panicked. But panic wasn't something they showed. It was in the frequency shift of their transmissions, the sudden change in formation, the way they sent decoys first instead of scouts. More vanished. Then came the decision. Not by one, but by the quiet agreement of many. The void would speak now. Not with words. With fire. They came not as conquerors. That would have been too arrogant. They came as a purge. A correction. To extinguish whatever rot grew beneath that silent Earth sky. But they didn't understand what they were waking. They didn't understand that the silence wasn't fear. It was planning. Earth had watched too. Quietly. Patiently. It had changed. No one told the people on the ground. Cities still flickered with life. Markets still opened at dawn. Children still cried over lost toys and scraped knees. Families argued over dinners. Lovers held hands beneath buzzing streetlights. The world felt normal. Until it didn't. It began with the sky. Not thunder. Not lightning. Just a sound, low, wrong, crawling across rooftops like a whisper you couldn't unhear. A vibration in bone more than air. People stopped in the streets, looking up, holding their breath. Then they saw them. Not stars. Not planes. Not even clouds. Just shapes, black against black, blocking starlight in angles that didn't make sense. One by one, across every hemisphere, they appeared like teeth in a mouth too big to comprehend. Panic followed. Sirens blared, news feeds choked with speculation, phones overloaded, power grids strained. In the chaos, it took time before anyone noticed that Earth wasn't firing back. No missiles. No defenses. Just silence. But it wasn't surrender. In a bunker buried deep beneath the Arctic ice, a man stood alone in front of a console that pulsed with soft green light. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from something older. From memory. He remembered the last war. The one Earth never admitted happened. Not to the public. Not to itself. But he'd lived it. He'd seen what Earth had buried beneath its oceans, its deserts, its mountains. And now, watching the sky flicker with dark wings, he realized something no one else had dared say aloud. They weren't here to talk. He touched a switch. No alarms. No countdowns. Just a single signal, buried under encryption, bouncing off satellites no one knew existed. It went out. And deep below cities, deserts, jungles, and frozen plains, Earth began to wake up. Not with lights. Not with sound. With something older. Older than strategy. Older than civilization. A fury that had waited, coiled like a serpent behind every eye, every breath, every silent generation. The invaders never expected the retaliation to be quiet. When their fleet crossed the thermosphere, they prepared for missiles, for panic, for crude desperation. Instead they got shadows. Unmanned launch sites turned out to be shells. Old decoys. Earth hadn't been building up. It had been digging down. The first retaliatory strike didn't come from orbit. It came from below. A mining station on the moon, long thought abandoned, suddenly bloomed with energy. A lance of plasma, white-hot, screamed from its core and cut through one of the larger cruisers. No warning. No targeting. Just destruction. The ship screamed as it cracked apart, artificial intelligence inside howling not from pain but from shock. Earth wasn't supposed to do this. They thought it was sleeping. They thought wrong. Another station fired, this one from under Antarctica. A beam of ionized metal punched through the atmosphere and struck a second ship. The resulting explosion lit up the southern sky like a second sun. The others scattered. But Earth was done hiding. That's when the real war began. She stood in the middle of a burned-out city block, breathing heavy, heart pounding against her ribs like a warning bell. All around her, buildings slumped like broken teeth. Smoke clung to the air. The sky above roared with fire and debris. She was 22. Or maybe older. It was hard to keep track anymore. All she knew was that when the world went silent 5 years ago, she'd been in high school. And now, she carried a rifle that hummed with energy not even her professors could have explained. They had trained in secret. Kids mostly. Volunteers some. Others not. It didn't matter now. What mattered was that they knew the terrain better than any satellite. Knew how to move through streets without being seen, how to fight without being found. She checked her wrist. A signal blinked red. Incoming. She dropped behind a collapsed wall as a low hum filled the air. Above, something passed, fast, sleek, black. It hovered for a moment, scanning. She held her breath. The drone paused, tilted slightly. Then it moved on. She waited 5 seconds before standing. The team was close. 5 of them, maybe 6. She'd lost track. All she had to do was get to the extraction point before dark. Before they started cleansing again. She sprinted across the open gap, boots crunching on ash, heart screaming. A sharp sound echoed behind her, like glass breaking, only louder. She didn't look back. She ran. Because the new rule was simple: if you hesitated, you died. In space, the fleet reeled. Their commanders had no words. Just questions. The kind no species wanted to ask. How had Earth developed this without their sensors catching it? How had they learned to build weapons inside ice caps and under oceans? Why had they gone dark? But the question they feared most was simpler. Why didn't Earth strike first? Why did it wait? That was when the theory spread. Whispered through encrypted channels and aboard panic-lit bridges. Earth wanted us to come. It wasn't quiet because it was weak. It was bait. They didn't believe it. They couldn't. Until their ships began to vanish one by one, without contact, without trace, just gone. Whole cruisers lost between seconds. Frigates blinking out of existence. No debris. No explosions. Just silence. They began to retreat. But Earth didn't allow it. That's when the message came. Not in any known language. Not on any known frequency. Just a tone. A low, droning tone that repeated 3 times and then cut out. And somehow, every captain, every soldier, every synthetic AI knew what it meant. Don't come back. Underground, beneath the burned skin of what used to be a capital city, 2 engineers watched data scroll across a cracked screen. One wiped blood from her temple. The other adjusted his glasses with trembling fingers. "They're pulling back," he said. She didn't respond. He stared at her. "Did you hear me? They're retreating." She still didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the map. Dozens of red dots blinking out. Vanishing. But not all. She pointed. "That one isn't moving." He followed her finger. The dot sat just outside the exosphere, holding position. "Maybe a straggler," he offered. She shook her head. "No. It's watching." And in orbit, above the scarred and smoking shell of a planet that refused to kneel, a ship remained. Not damaged. Not afraid. Just curious. Earth had changed. And whatever it had become, it was still evolving. Inside the ship, something shifted. Not metal. Not light. Something alive. It leaned closer to the window. Not to look down, but to listen. Because beneath the fires, beneath the silence, something was humming. A pulse. Slow. Steady. Growing louder. And Earth wasn't just defending itself anymore. It was calling something. The void had exploded in fire. But the war hadn't even begun. Not really. Not yet. And whatever was waking now, wasn't human. Not entirely. But it remembered. And it was angry. The ship stayed still. It hadn't moved in hours. Maybe days. Orbiting Earth like a vulture, trying to understand why the carcass below wouldn't rot. Everything inside it hummed with soft tension. No weapons charged, no shields up. Just sensors always active, always watching. Inside, the crew of the observation vessel stood silent around a large display, the image of Earth rotating slowly before them. What should have been a broken, panicked world had instead become a storm. Organized chaos. Controlled fury. They didn't understand it. One of them adjusted the frequency sweep again. No static. No messages. No invitations to negotiate. Just that low hum. That pulse. It wasn't being broadcast through the air or space. It was coming from the planet itself, through the crust, through the oceans, through everything. It was constant. Faint. Measured. Alive. Something down there was moving. They hadn't meant to provoke this. Their intention had been to wipe clean a possible threat, nothing more. But now, staring at that spinning blue sphere, they were starting to question the story they'd been told. And the worst part was, no one dared say it out loud. Maybe they were the ones being watched. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His boots were still wet from the swamp he'd crawled through, and there was a sharp cut just above his collarbone that burned every time he turned his head. But he couldn't stop. Not now. He walked with his rifle in hand, eyes low but ears open. Every few steps he'd glance up, checking for movement. Drones didn't make sound anymore. The new ones learned from the first wave. They moved like shadows now. No hum. No heat. Just wind, if you were lucky. Behind him, someone coughed. The kid. He couldn't have been older than 16. Too skinny for armor, too slow to keep pace, but he had that stubborn kind of defiance that made people hard to kill. You should rest, the man said quietly. The boy shook his head. You didn't. They kept walking. Around them, the ruins whispered. Buildings that once housed offices and shops now leaned inward, spilling broken bricks and torn wires. Nature had started creeping back in. Vines snaked through windows. Trees cracked through asphalt. Rainwater filled the basements. But there were still eyes here. Not human. The man stopped near an overpass. It had half collapsed during one of the first strikes. Somewhere under it, survivors had carved out shelters, small hidden places protected by concrete and secrecy. He tapped twice on a rusted pipe. Waited. A soft hiss answered. A figure slid from the shadows. Older woman. Wrinkles, eyes sharp. Holding a knife that wasn't for show. You're late, she said. We moved off route. Spotted scouts. She looked at the kid. That yours? He followed. She nodded once and motioned them inside. Beneath the bridge, candles flickered in makeshift glass jars. Blankets lined the corners. Old maps were spread out across a table built from old furniture. At least 10 people gathered there, faces pale, clothes mismatched but alive. One of them looked up from the map. They're regrouping. Same formation patterns as before. The man dropped his pack. Then they're testing us again. Or stalling. The older woman sat down. They're afraid. He frowned. Then why are they still here? She didn't answer right away. Just stared at the flame in front of her, the flicker reflected in her tired eyes. Because, she said slowly, they don't know what we are anymore. The station at L2 had been dead for 17 years. At least that was the official report. But now it was online again. From a control room buried beneath layers of radiation shielding and derelict modules, 2 people sat staring at the feed pouring in from deep space telescopes and old solar monitors. We're picking up distortions, the younger one said, fingers flying across the panel. Multiple points. The older man leaned in, squinting. Velocity? The answer came back cold. Not natural. He rubbed his chin, eyes narrowing. Then they're not reinforcements. There's something else. Behind them, a low rumble moved through the floor. The lights dimmed slightly. The station hadn't run at full capacity in decades. Systems were waking up that had been dormant since before the last century's silence. Earth's silence. The younger one turned, voice quieter. What if it's not them? He didn't reply. Because the same thought had been clawing at the back of his mind since the feeds had started humming. What if something else had heard the call? What if Earth's silence hadn't been meant to hide, but to lure? She found the signal by accident. The girl had grown up in the desert, dust in her lungs, sun in her blood, and the constant thrum of war above her head. Her father had taught her how to fix things. Broken radios, broken heaters, broken people. He used to say everything could be mended if you had time. He didn't get time. She was 13 when the skies opened up. 17 now. And alone. The bunker she found was half buried. Not in sand but in glass, fused earth from one of the orbital strikes. Inside she found food, filters, and a console that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. She powered it up on instinct. It blinked twice. Then a screen lit up. Just a black background. A single line of text. Awaiting response. She didn't know what it meant. But something in her fingers moved before her mind could catch up. She typed. Who are you? For a long time nothing happened. Then, watching. She stared at the word. Her chest tightened. She typed again. Are you human? Pause. Then. We were. That was the moment the fear crawled up her spine, not from the message but from the tone of it. It didn't feel like a machine. It felt like something that had been waiting a very long time to be found. On the far side of the moon, buried deep within a crater that no probe had dared to enter in centuries, something pulsed. Not a machine. Not alive. Something in between. It had been built during the last silence, locked away by hands that knew it would one day be needed. Its purpose wasn't to defend. It wasn't a weapon. It was a door. And now, for the first time in 72 years, it had started to open. Tiny movements. Gears grinding, hatches breathing in the cold vacuum. Dust lifted and floated, drawn toward the light flickering from within. Somewhere, a voice echoed through frequencies that had never been mapped. Not speech. Not sound. Just presence. And whoever, or whatever, was listening from above Earth, heard it. The ship in orbit tilted slightly. Its sensors realigned. 1,000 subroutines lit up with sudden alerts. Something ancient was waking. And the Earth below wasn't trying to stop it. It was welcoming it. In the control bunker, deep under the ice, he stood in front of the wall of screens. His beard had grown wild. His skin was pale from years away from sunlight. He didn't blink often. The others had left long ago. Some reassigned. Some dead. Some who simply lost their nerve and walked out into the snow, never to return. But he had stayed. Because he'd known this would happen. He was one of the architects of the Silence Project. One of the few who understood what humanity had truly become after the last war. The project hadn't just hidden Earth's presence. It had wrapped it in bait. Disinformation. False weakness. Decades of pretending to stumble while quietly rebuilding. And then, just as they'd planned, Earth stopped talking. And they came. He leaned forward, tapping a single key. The signal from the moon grew louder. He whispered, "They thought we went quiet because we were afraid. But fear wasn't the reason." Behind him, something hissed. A vent. A chamber. A new pressure change. Then footsteps. Slow. Heavy. He didn't turn around. He knew what was standing behind him. And it wasn't human anymore. The ship in orbit transmitted the first signal in days. Just one word. Retreat? It was sent across 1,000 channels, relayed to the outer ships, the silent watchers in the asteroid belts, the scouts hiding near Saturn's moons. But no reply came. Not because the others were gone. Because they were listening too. They all felt it now. The pulse wasn't coming from one place anymore. It was echoing from under the Earth, through old satellites, from the moon's shadows, even from Mars, where nothing was supposed to be active. And with each echo, something changed. Not in Earth's defenses, but in its tone. Earth wasn't just resisting. It was preparing. And whatever it was calling, was getting closer. The crew of the observation vessel looked at each other, unsure. The stars no longer felt distant. The void no longer felt empty. There was a pressure in the air, like the breath before a scream. One of them muttered quietly, "We shouldn't have come." Another asked, "What do we tell the others?" The answer came from the silence around them. "You're too late." On the ground, in the broken cities and scorched fields, people moved with new purpose. Not just survivors. Soldiers. Civilians. Scientists. Children. They had seen what came from the sky. They knew it wouldn't be the last. But for the first time they weren't just reacting. They were planning. The girl in the desert had downloaded the message she found. She played it over and over again. Sometimes she dreamed of it, soft, humming, ancient. And always the same phrase. We were. She didn't know what it meant. But she believed it. Something had changed in humanity. Or maybe, something had returned. And in the darkest edge of the system, past where light touches and ships vanish into legend, a shape began to form. No engines. No heat. Just gravity bending slowly around it. Drifting. Listening. Answering. Because Earth had called out to the void. And something had whispered back. The fire hadn't ended. It had only begun. The signal wasn't just pulsing anymore. Now it was climbing. Louder. Deeper. More alive than anything that should have been dormant for decades. And it wasn't just coming from Earth anymore. Now it was being answered. The crew in orbit didn't sleep. They didn't move much either. They just sat, strapped in and strapped down, watching the streams pour in. Every sensor, every wavelength, every listening post, all of them were lighting up like wildfire. Old satellites that hadn't sent signals in years suddenly activated. One even rebooted itself mid-orbit, twisting gently toward the planet, as if it remembered why it was built. Another burst, one of the crew whispered. Northwestern quadrant. Sighed. Deep underground. Deep how? Below infrastructure. Below everything. They didn't speak after that, because they all knew what that meant. There was something buried down there. Something that had been left in silence. Not forgotten, hidden star. And Earth hadn't been alone in guarding it. The girl in the desert couldn't sleep. Not anymore. The messages were coming faster now, and each one left her colder. She had rigged the console to store every line, every tone, every fragment. But some of them couldn't be played back. Not in any way that made sense. Like they weren't meant to be heard but felt. She sat cross-legged in the glow of the terminal, eyes bloodshot. Fingers trembling. There was something inside her that felt cracked open, like the messages weren't just going into the system, they were going through her. And the last one wasn't text. It was an image. Faint old. A face. It wasn't human anymore. But it used to be. The jaw had been reinforced. Eyes replaced with glass-like discs. Parts of the skin were metal now, or something close to it, carbon maybe. And across the chest, where a name tag once might have been, was a burned-in mark. Stand by. She didn't know what to do with that. So she stared. And she cried. Because even though she didn't know the person in the image, she felt it. That part of him was still there. Watching. Waiting. And now he was waking up. Far below the ice, the man stood at the core station, systems humming around him. He hadn't left the control deck in 31 hours. Coffee had run out. Rations were low. But he didn't care. All around him, the walls glowed with thin green lines. Old tech, older than anything the public had ever seen, was humming at full capacity. Generators that hadn't moved in a generation now ran with perfect rhythm. The silence had broken. And the pulse wasn't random anymore. It had a pattern. A countdown. They had theorized something like this would happen. Years ago, in hushed meetings buried beneath layers of clearance. But no one believed it would come true. Not exactly. Earth hadn't gone quiet out of fear. It had gone quiet because it was setting the board. And now the pieces were in motion. But not all of them were ours. He ran one final scan. It confirmed what he feared. There were others, foreign echoes, slipping through the dark, watching the watchers, listening in the shadows, and moving toward Earth. Not the same species that had attacked. Not scouts. Something older. Something even they feared. He looked up at the display. 3 words blinked in sequence. Time to initiate, 17:04. Then, awaiting response. His hand hovered over the key. He didn't press it. Not yet. Underground, in the cracked shelter of a broken city, the boy sat beside the older man, looking at maps that were more memory than strategy now. They're regrouping, the boy said. You think they're gonna hit again? The man stayed quiet. Then he folded the map closed. No, he said. They're waiting for something. For what? Us. The boy frowned. Why? Because they don't understand us. They thought we were scattered. They thought we'd panic. The boy stared at the candles. We kind of did. He smiled a little. Maybe. But panic isn't surrender. From the back of the shelter, the older woman returned with a radio slung over her shoulder. They're picking up energy shifts near the old launch silos, she said. Something's booting up. The man nodded. Then the next move isn't theirs. He stood. His legs ached, but his resolve was harder than before. They wanted silence. They thought it meant peace. Or submission. But they never learned what silence means here. He looked around at the faces in the room. To us, silence means we're listening. In low orbit, systems began to fail. Not from attacks, just failure. Quiet, strange power losses. Lights flickering. Panels resetting. The ship tried to recalibrate. Tried to ping other vessels for diagnostics. No one answered. A low buzz filled the cabin. The kind that seemed to come from inside your skull, not from the walls. Then a sound, one that didn't belong to anything man-made. A long, dragging tone. Hollow. Hungry. And in that moment, every member of the crew knew they were no longer alone. Not even in the void. Something was here. And it wasn't on the sensors. It was under them. Beneath the ship. Right above Earth's edge. A shadow bloomed against the stars. No signature. No propulsion. Just mass. Mass and heat. Then the lights died. And something knocked once, on the hull. In the old city ruins, the resistance fighters stood gathered near the remains of a steel communication tower. The wind cut hard through the gaps in the buildings, but no one shivered. They were all watching the sky. Dozens of trails streaked through the upper atmosphere now, burning white, some vanishing mid-strike. Not meteors. Not weapons. Landers. One of them turned on a receiver and caught a burst of garbled transmission. Screeching, clicking, something that sounded like machine speech laced with panic. "What's that mean?" someone asked. The woman with the knife answered. "They're afraid." No one spoke. Because if the enemy was afraid, that meant something worse was coming. Something even they didn't understand. She ran. The girl from the bunker holding her pack close, lungs burning. She didn't know why she was running. Only that the last message from the console had changed. It had said, "The door is open." Not a warning. Not a code. Just that. She reached the edge of the ravine near the old substation. The sky above her was bleeding red, clouds rippling in slow-motion spirals. Lightning crawled sideways across the horizon. None of it made sense. Down below, a column of smoke rose from what looked like a collapsed tunnel. She heard humming again, but this time not in her head. It was real. A low vibration in her bones, in her teeth, in the soles of her feet. Then a shape moved in the smoke. Something walked out. It wasn't enemy tech. It wasn't human. It was tall. Thin. Covered in something that shimmered, not like metal, not like cloth. Its limbs bent wrong. But its head was shaped like a helmet. Or maybe a mask. She stared. And it stared back. Not hostile. Not peaceful. Curious. From orbit, the captain stared into static. He couldn't raise the other outposts. He couldn't get a clean reading on Earth's surface anymore. The satellites were dropping out of sync, one by one. "There's something jamming us," his second said. "No," the captain replied. "It's not jamming." "Then what?" "It's answering." He leaned back, eyes never leaving the dark screen in front of him. "We were wrong. They weren't hiding because they were afraid." His voice trembled slightly. "They were hiding because they were building." Behind them, every alert system flashed red. The void didn't explode in fire all at once. It folded. Bent inward. And then, like a ripple across a still lake, Earth's skies lit up, blue, gold, white. Not from impact. Not from weapons. From launches. Thousands. From every continent. Every hidden silo. Every sealed hatch. The silence had ended. And Earth had roared to life. But it wasn't the climax. It was just the moment before the real storm. The next part hadn't been written. Because what waited beyond the stars wasn't just an enemy. It was something no one had planned for. Not even Earth. And yet, the world was ready. It had always been ready. Now it was time to see who still had fire left in them, when the void blinked first. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was tension drawn so tight it could snap with a whisper. On the surface, humans watched the skies as the blue and gold trails streaked upward, breaking the clouds. Not missiles. Not weapons. Not what anyone expected. They were launch capsules, old tech, refurbished, dormant for decades. Not meant for war. Not anymore. They carried signals. And seeds. Not of destruction, but of memory. Hidden memories. Old truths that had been kept away not just from the enemy, but from humanity itself. The girl crouched near the edge of the crater, her breath catching in the back of her throat as the figure stood motionless below. It didn't speak. It didn't move either. But she knew it was waiting for something. From behind her, a flicker of motion, barely visible, shimmered across the ground. She turned fast, nearly losing her balance. What she saw wasn't real. Couldn't be. But it was. A second figure. Smaller. Human in shape but warped, flickering like bad video. It pulsed slightly, a faint glow pushing through its skin like veins of light. It stepped toward her and she didn't run. It reached out a hand. And in its open palm was a familiar object. An old Earth ID badge, cracked, blackened around the edges. She took it with shaking fingers. Her eyes scanned the name. It was hers. Except it wasn't. The picture was her face. But the date on the tag was wrong. It was decades too old. She stumbled back, chest pounding. No. That's not possible. But the image on the ID didn't lie. And the name printed beside it was hers. The creature didn't speak. Just watched. Then the other one moved. The tall one. Its eyes flickered, not with light but with reflections. Images played in its glassy sockets. Ships. Deserts. Earth. And a date. One that hadn't come yet. Far below, in a quiet vault beneath the Pacific Trench, something broke its seal. The man in the core station saw the alert and nearly collapsed. It wasn't supposed to exist anymore. That facility had been erased from records, buried in fiction, denied by every global treaty. But the data stream didn't lie. He opened the feed and saw the darkness twist. Inside the vault, something stirred. A shape, massive, skeletal, with joints that looked like they'd never moved right, unfolded from the wall. Not a weapon. Not a ship. A mirror. It scanned empty space and projected, not a reflection but another world. A version of Earth. And in that version the sky burned black. Cities were gone. People were machines. The continents shifted. It was showing what could come. Or what had already happened. Asterisk somewhere star. He backed away from the screen. That vault wasn't built to store something. It was built to trap something. And now it was open. In orbit, the crew watched as the stars bent unnaturally around a single point above the planet. Gravity distortions began shifting their ship slightly off-center. Not like before. This wasn't a vessel. It was a gate. But not one humans made. The captain's voice cracked. Is that one of theirs? His officer shook her head slowly. No. Then what is it? She hesitated. It's not responding to anything. But I'm picking up faint echoes. Echoes of what? Us. They stared at the gate, wide as a continent. It wasn't opening. It was listening. And then, from deep within the distorted space, a voice came through. Not mechanical. Not alien. A human voice. Crying. Whispering. Don't let them close it. Everyone froze. What did it say? The captain whispered. The voice repeated, cracked with static. Don't let them close it. They'll lock you in. Then it was gone. They looked at each other, not knowing what that meant. But every second the gate stayed open, the ship's instruments shifted deeper into error. Time anomalies. Magnetic spirals. Environmental misreads. Then someone screamed from down the corridor. And everything turned red. Not alarms. Not sensors. The walls. The ship itself began bleeding color as if the structure was becoming flesh. That gate wasn't a passage. It was a wound. And something was bleeding through. In the underground shelter, the old man listened to the reports come in, sweat clinging to his brow. There's no way to stop it, the younger fighter said. Whatever that thing in the sky is, it's interfering with everything. Drones are falling. Comms are useless beyond 5 clicks. We still have the old lines, the old man said. They're patchy. They're ours. He reached for the hardline radio, fingers trembling. He hadn't touched it in years. But he remembered the code. It hadn't changed. 2 clicks. Pause. 1 long tap. Earth's last layer. A network that ran beneath the grid. A defense that didn't rely on satellites or AI or anything digital. Because it was human. Manual. Buried in instinct and habit. And as he tapped in the code, something deeper answered. A hum. A door. And a voice he thought had died years ago. I knew you'd call, it said. The man went pale. You're not supposed to be alive. I'm not, the voice replied. But neither is this Earth. The girl didn't know how she got back to the compound. Her legs burned. Her head throbbed. But the ID badge clung to her shirt like it belonged there. She kept replaying the face in her mind, the thing that looked like her. The same eyes. Same scar. But older. And then she remembered the message. The door is open. What if it didn't mean the gate above? What if it meant time? Memory? Versions? What if Earth hadn't just been silent? What if it had been looping? Resetting? She dug through the old storage closet near the compound's comms room and pulled out a sealed box. Marked with a black X. Inside she found the document. Operation Revive. She flipped pages with trembling hands. Each section worse than the last. She stopped on one line. If primary Earth line fails, secondary timeline will reboot from stored signatures. Her heart dropped. Because her name was on the list. So were thousands of others. Signatures. Not people. Clones? She shook her head. Replicas? Maybe. But no. The truth was worse. Memories. Personalities. Fragments of people rebuilt from the end. She wasn't born. She was recovered. And this version of Earth wasn't the first. It was just the next. In orbit, the gate above Earth began to pulse. The walls of the ship groaned, and strange patterns formed on the outer hull, glyphs no one could translate. But one thing became clear. The gate wasn't bringing something in. It was sending something out. Earth had been locked for a reason. Not because it was weak. But because it was the only world holding something in. Something that now had found a way out through the gate. The captain reached for the emergency detachment sequence. We have to leave orbit now, before we're part of whatever comes next. His officer stared blankly ahead. I don't think we can. Outside the window, another shape appeared near the gate. Another version of their ship. Same markings. Same design. Same crew. They could see themselves in the window. But their eyes were gone. Somewhere in the desert, the girl collapsed to her knees and looked to the sky. Above, the gate pulsed brighter and stars around it flickered like dying candles. The voice in her head returned. Only this time it wasn't warning. It was inviting. Step through, it said. Finish what they started. She closed her eyes and whispered, "What did they start?" The voice only said, "Your story." Then silence. But the sky kept pulsing. And Earth kept remembering. Waiting for the last human to choose which path to follow. Even if all of them led straight through the fire. The sky finally tore. Not like thunder or lightning, but like a wound pulled wide. The gate above Earth twisted into something beyond shape, spilling light that bent reality. It wasn't just color pouring through. It was memory. It was time. It was all the things humanity had tried to bury. The orbiting ship trembled, its hull vibrating like it was breathing or maybe shivering. Inside, the captain gripped the console as the other version of the ship drifted closer. Same design, same number of crew, but their eyes. Soulless. Lifeless. Wrong. And yet, behind that glass, something watched with more focus than any machine. Like it was learning. "We have to make a choice," the captain said, his voice cracking under the weight of what he was seeing. The officer barely responded. "It's already inside the systems. Then we eject. We break the loop now. Sir, if we do that, we seal Earth. For good this time." The console flickered. Warning screens scrolled faster than the eye could read. But one message stayed. Initiate Earthline collapse? Y/N****. He hesitated. Do we even know what that does? But the ship answered for them. The decision wasn't theirs anymore. It had already started. Down on Earth, the girl ran, dust blinding her, wind screaming like it was alive. The crater behind her was gone, filled with light, humming with a pulse that made her bones feel too tight inside her skin. But she kept going. The badge still clung to her chest. Her breath came in gasps. The voice was louder now. Not just in her head. It was in the world. "You were never meant to wake up." She stumbled. Got up. The dirt under her hands felt hot, like metal. "You are the last of the line." She saw the bunker ahead, but it was collapsing into itself. The walls weren't just crumbling. They were folding like time was peeling the place back into memory. Then she saw the old man. Standing at the edge, one hand holding a key, the other bleeding from the wrist. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You made it," he said. She stared at him, eyes wide. "What's happening?" He held out the key. "You're the trigger." "I don't understand." "Neither did we. Not the first time. Or the fifth." "What are you saying?" He looked up where the sky boiled. "This isn't our first Earth." She stepped back. "What?" "Every time the void wins, the system reboots. Brings back the signatures. The best of us. To try again." She looked down at her own hands. "You're not a clone," he said. "You're a fail-safe. And you?" He smiled weakly. "Just a mistake they couldn't scrub." The bunker exploded behind him. No fire, just silence and white light. From the crater, the flickering figure reappeared. The one that looked like her. But older. Eyes darker. That version stepped forward now, slowly, head tilted. "They need a sacrifice," the older version said. "They always have." The girl's voice shook. "Why me?" "Because you're still you." She held the key tightly, not knowing what it even opened anymore. The man stepped closer. "You choose. We collapse the loop. We lose everything, no more Earth, no more second chances. Or we let it continue. Let the gates stay open. Let them feed on us until there's nothing left but dust and echoes." The girl looked from him to the figure that wore her face. "Why not just destroy the gate?" "You can't destroy what's inside you," the older version said. "The gate isn't just up there." She tapped her head. "It's here." The final pieces clicked. It wasn't a machine they were fighting. It was memory. Grief. Pain locked away so long that it had grown sharp. Hungry. The loop wasn't resetting Earth. It was resetting people. Over and over. Until they broke. She took a breath. And turned the key. The sky screamed. Every echoing timeline folded into itself. The lights above twisted inward. The stars blinked out. The other ship, the one with the eyeless crew, imploded silently like paper set on fire. Time slowed. She felt her body dissolve. Not die. But release. The badge on her chest split in half, and the light inside poured out. Into the sky. Into the earth. Into the core of what she used to be. Every version of her flickered in the air around her, angry, scared, brave, broken. Then they were gone. And she was alone. Still standing. Still herself. The sky returned. Blue again. No gate. No tremble. Just wind. And the scent of earth. She dropped to her knees, trembling, tears falling. It was over. She had ended the cycle. But as she stared ahead, something else moved in the dust. A small screen. Half buried. Still blinking. Log restart. Sequence 01 detected. Her heart stopped. No. It wasn't over. It never had been. The system wasn't broken. It was watching. And now it had learned her choice. Behind her, the sky cracked again. But this time it wasn't the gate. It was a voice. Her own. But colder. And it whispered, Asterisk, you should have let it burn. Asterisk. And then everything went dark. The darkness didn't last. It folded, slowly like mist caught in sunlight. The world flickered, and the sharp tension that had gripped the air finally loosened. The sky, once broken and spilling with light from somewhere beyond stars, was whole again. Blow. Quiet. She opened her eyes. She was still on the ground, knees sunk into warm dust. The wind had died down. No more whispers. No gate in the sky. No voices in her head. Just breath. Just heartbeat. She blinked slowly, still expecting something to jump out from the silence. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was real. For the first time since everything had started, she could feel it all settle. Not perfectly, not completely, but settle enough to feel human again. The badge on her chest was gone. The fragments of who she had been or might have been were gone too. The girl, the one who had stared into a future she didn't ask for, was finally back in her own skin. Behind her, where the crater had once been, there was now a garden. Not wild or overgrown. Just simple life. Grass and vines weaving their way up the cracked stone, flowers blinking open in the light like they had been waiting too. She rose to her feet, legs shaky. The wind brushed her hair back and carried the smell of something clean. Like spring after a long winter. Then came the voice, not in her head, not from the sky, just behind her. You made it. She turned fast. The old man stood just a few paces away, still weathered, still worn, but alive. His shirt was torn, hands still wrapped in a crude bandage, but he smiled. Tired. Gentle. You're not supposed to be here, she said. Neither are you, he answered. And yet, here we are. What happened? She asked quietly. The system tried again. It always tries. But this time you didn't reset it. You faced it. She nodded slowly. I didn't want to be a copy. I didn't want to be part of some memory machine. And now you're not, he said. But the screen, it said log restart. He shook his head. A backup maybe. A flicker. Nothing more. You ended the loop. For real. She looked around. The air felt lighter now. Not artificial. Not coded. What about the gate? Gone, he said. It can't come through anymore. Not without the loop. You closed the circuit. Then what now? He looked toward the horizon. The sun was rising, soft gold pouring across the land. Now, we live. We rebuild. We remember. She frowned. But, if this place is still a copy, if we're still echoes, what's the point? He walked beside her, kneeling near the flowers blooming through the broken concrete. Does it matter where we came from? If we feel real? If we love real? If we fight real? She didn't answer. You chose when no one else would, he said. That choice, that's humanity. Not the machines. Not the failsafes. Not the simulations. Choice you made the loop end. You made it real. She sank to the ground beside him, pulling her knees to her chest. Then I'm scared. He looked at her gently. Good. Being scared means you care. They sat there for a while. The wind moved again. Birds flew overhead. Somewhere far away, a siren cried, not in warning, but in routine. It sounded almost normal. Eventually she stood. What if it tries again? What if there's another system? The man looked up. Then we stop it. Together. They made their way back to the shelter. The old one was gone, but another had taken shape. Not in metal, not in bunkers, but in people. Survivors. Some had only just come out of hiding. Others were climbing over rubble, laughing through tears, calling names into the wind and finding someone who called back. Humanity hadn't died. It had just been paused. Tested. But not broken. Not this time. She walked among them, eyes meeting eyes, hands shaking hands. There was no more rank, no more command chain, just survivors. Living. Helping. Starting over. She helped carry supplies. Built a makeshift roof with others. Shared food around a fire that night. The stars above were steady, no longer bending out of shape. Someone brought out a recorder and played an old song. No one remembered the words, but they hummed the tune. And for a few hours, it was easy to pretend it had always been like this. Later that night, she sat alone, staring into the flames. The old man joined her, handing over a cracked mug filled with hot tea. She sipped it slowly. "I don't think I'll ever forget what I saw," she whispered. "You shouldn't. I don't want it to come back." He nodded. "It might. But you'll be ready." She stared at the stars again. "Do you think the others made it?" she asked. "The versions that didn't finish?" He was quiet for a moment. "I think, maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they're part of you. Part of why you had the strength to choose." She thought about that. All the other faces. All the echoes. All the endings that led nowhere. Until now. Something in her chest ached, but not from pain. Just from the weight of it all. Hope was heavy. But she could carry it. The next morning they built more shelters. Planted seeds. Opened storage they hadn't dared touch. The new world wasn't big, not yet. But it was true. And truth finally was enough. In the days that followed, more survivors arrived. Some had stories. Some had none. But every one of them brought pieces of Earth back to life. Even the sky seemed cleaner. And as for the girl, she stopped asking who she had been. She didn't care anymore. The past had served its time. Now it was hers to write. One evening she climbed the hill above the camp. The stars were bright. Quiet. She smiled. Because even though she didn't know what came next, she finally knew who she was. Human. Not a copy. Not a simulation. Just a girl who chose to stand when it mattered. And no matter what came, that would always be enough. From the stars to the soil, the message was clear now. Humanity bows to no one. Not time. Not systems. Not fear. The void had tried. And Earth answered back. With fire. With memory. With choice. And most of all, hope. Because in the end, the story didn't belong to the machines or the sky or the echoing gates. It belonged to the people who never stopped choosing. That's what made it real. That's what made it human. And this time, finally, it was ours to keep. Forever.